202 ground, runway 24, taxi via Alpha.
24 via Alpha, good morning, Brandon, 202.
Hey, welcome back to Podcasting on a Plane. I'm Brandon Gonzalez, and thanks for joining. Today, we're hanging on the air side with somebody you probably know. Well, if you're active on social media, you know for sure. Like Instagram in particular. You're going to know photography. That's right, I'm talking about the always fun, always present, always writing, and always snapping photos around the airport. The one, the only, Jennifer. She's here today, and she's going to tell us all about what fuels her unwavering passion for anything that flies, really. It doesn't matter. And what keeps her motivated to keep writing about it and taking great pictures, too. But first, I always want to start by giving some gratitude where it's due, and I'm talking about all those that have made a contribution to the show through Patreon or through helping out with content, comments, feedback, shout-outs, whatever. It's all really appreciated, and I thank you guys all so much. And when I was on my trip a couple weeks back, I got a real surprise from a new friend of the show. So before we do anything else, it's time for us to give a really extra special shout-out to my man Ted, Comanche 5449er Papa. He made a really generous donation to the show, just out of nowhere. And he says it gave him something to listen to while he was stuck in Challenger school. Well, cool. I'm glad we could help. And I actually saw him the other day. Well, okay, I didn't see him. I was from the tower, but he was out using that Challenger type rating, and it looked like so much fun. So if you're ever out there and hear Comanche 49 Papa on frequency, make sure to pass along a nice hello from me. And I want to also welcome a new show patron. You all know his name. It's Anthony Tamburini. He's been on the show twice before, and he's a patron now too, which is pretty awesome. So make sure you go check him out. It's at Anthony Aviator. Good times. And another community member. Who remembers this guy?
Alaska 202.
Is that Alaska 202 trying to get Palomar clearance?
Yeah, I was just going to get a radio check from Brandon.
You're on clear.
Thank you.
Our mystery Alaska Airlines pilot is named Steven Andrus, and he sent me an email connecting the dots that he was the guy who always says hi on his way down to Mexico. So cool. And as it turns out, his daughter Stephanie is entertaining the idea of becoming an air traffic controller too. So I was really happy to put together a facility visit for the two of them. So they came by, they visited, and I'm hoping they like what they saw. So who knows, maybe you're going to be hearing her voice in the next couple years too. And last but not least, Hotel Mike. You remember him. He used a new feature called Buy Me a Coffee. This is a really cool website. I just found out about it myself. But you know how when you have creators you like maybe he doesn't have to be a podcaster, he could be a YouTuber, someone on Instagram, whatever, but somebody who's kind of giving you some value, and maybe you don't want to become a full-on patron of whatever it is that they do, and I understand that, that's fine, but you're like, you know what, that really helped me out, I'd buy this guy a coffee. Or, hey, can I buy you a coffee and pick your brain for 20, 30 minutes? Well, this website's really cool because what it allows you to do is go, quote unquote, buy him a coffee. So for just $3, you can buy him one or maybe even a couple, but Hotel Mike bought me 5 coffees, which was really nice of him. And ever since I found out that the website exists, I've been clicking around buying coffees left and right for people I like. As a matter of fact, the guy who helped me select this particular microphone I'm talking into, he's given me a lot of value over the years. So I've sent him a couple things to review, and I bought him a couple coffees too. It's kind of a cool way to do it. So anyway, Hotel Mike, thank you so much for your support of the show. And also, how was your flight review? I can't wait to hear about it. I hope that the technique we talked about on the show worked for you. And if you could, use the SpeakPipe feature on the website and record us all a follow-up. I know we'd all love to hear about it. All right, so let's get to some stuff. Remember back in the NASA episode about ASRS, I told you about the program, the share program. It's called CISP, C-I-S-P, between NASA, which is the overall industry program, and then ATSAP, which is our ATC-specific one. Well, I thought I might start sharing some of the good stuff that comes out of that program with you guys, so that no matter where you fall into the grand scheme of this aviation thing, you can hear what's getting shared within the system. So as the information gets shared between the two programs, they start looking for trends, for things that there are a lot of reports about in the system. And for the month that I'm picking, it was actually a couple months ago, but I really like this one. This one was from May, and the discussion sheet talks about a critical phase of flight, too much information being given. So there are some excerpts from these reports I'm going to read you, and they're kind of neat, but it turns out that this is sort of a system-wide thing. One quote says, "The tower gave me taxi instructions when we were landing at approximately 80 knots. Once the FO landing, the captain has callouts to make. Extended speed brakes, deployed thrust reverse, 60 knots. I have the aircraft. This is still a critical phase of flight. I can't talk and listen effectively at the same time. We were given something that ended with a hold short of runway blank, which was almost a mile away, and that instruction was not necessary." Another one says, during landing rollout, we were given a full litany of taxi instructions. These instructions are being given while slowing through 135 knots. The FO was a flying pilot and did a superb job of landing at night on a short runway. During landing rollout, I did not clearly hear taxi instructions as my attention was completely focused on the runway and stopping. I will not acknowledge or accept taxi instructions during the landing rollout since it is paramount that we concentrate on safe guidance down the runway centerline and the stopping of the aircraft. Yeah, amen. Anyway, there's a few more of these, but you guys obviously get the idea. So for these sheets that go out to the facilities to actually have group discussions with, the overall gist is a lot of pilots felt as if they were giving too much information during a critical phase. And sometimes it's actually hard to tell, particularly at big airports where an aircraft might be landing very far away. It's hard to tell when they've actually really slowed to a safe taxi speed and had a second to sort of clean everything up. So, I'm not going to take sides on this, but what's really neat about this program is that these are excerpts from actual reports. So they've, of course, been de-identified and so on, so that it remains confidential. But this is what's actually happening out in the universe. So this feedback is really nice for us as controllers to have so that we can know that, if you're given these instructions too early, that it really truly is messing with pilots. And we, of course, don't want to be doing that. So after the excerpts portion, they kind of write up a little summary blurb, and they say things like pilot reports received via the Confidential Information Share Program indicate several instances of control instructions being issued to pilots while aircraft are still in the critical landing and rollout phase of flight. While the aircraft may be safely on the ground, air crews still have several actions to take and coordinate to safely slow the plane to taxi speed. These actions might include deployment of thrust reverse, extension of speed brakes, speed callouts, transfer of control between the first officer and captain. On top of the workload pilots are accomplishing during touchdown and rollout, the noise created by thrust reverses may make communication with controllers more difficult, and pilots may miss important taxi instructions. These missed or misunderstood taxi instructions may result in surface errors, which can put aircraft in the path of other landing or departing traffic or other aircraft on taxiways. And then they, of course, give a little excerpt from our book, the 7110.65, and I'm going to read it to you so you know exactly what our book says about this. It's a note, and it says, runway exiting or taxi instructions should not normally be issued to an aircraft prior to or immediately after touchdown. Makes sense. And my favorite part of these is that they actually provide a little extra for facility discussion. So as groups have meetings with their supervisors and their controllers and things like that, you can talk about things like how do you determine when it might be safe or appropriate to issue taxi instructions to an aircraft on rollout? Or maybe your specific facility, describe runway or taxiway areas where timely taxi instructions might be required to ensure safe movement after landing rollout. And how do those things change with different operational configurations? Look at an airport like Chicago O'Hare. The runways are going in every single direction. So as they change takeoff and landing runways, you are trading one set of issues for another set of issues. So the controllers need to, of course, be proficient on what those new issues are when they make the change. And maybe most importantly, they suggest that we talk about how we mitigate situations where timely taxi instructions might be critical to ensuring an aircraft clears the runway and remains out of the way for other aircraft during their landing. So now we know. And since I read this report, I've really tried to be more cognizant myself about doing that kind of thing. And with any luck, I guess everyone has too. Have you noticed a change over the last few months in that? Send me a feedback. Let's hear about it. Anyway, good times. Now for the really fun stuff, though. You know how I'm always saying to follow the show on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook? And for those of you that do, well, you're going to know today's guest for sure. And for those of you that say, I'm not a teenager, I don't care about Instagram, you might after today. Maybe go sign up for an account, because if you spent more than about 5 seconds playing around on Aviation social media, I guarantee you've seen some of her photos. That's right. We're here with the one and the only Jen Niffer. Welcome to Podcasting on a Plane. I'm so excited you're here.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I love your show, so it's really exciting to be here.
And I love all of your stuff that you put on social media, and that's actually how I kind of stumbled upon you, and all the fun stuff that you do is through social media, and you're really active on that, which I think is awesome. I wish a lot of people would share their airport experiences more. I know you don't want to talk about who your exact employer is, but just for fun, let's talk about what it is that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I work for and at a medium-sized airport in the Midwest, and I work in the accounting department. So when I'm actually working during working hours, my day is filled with invoices and spreadsheets. But when I'm on my lunch break or before work or after work, I really make the most of working for an airport by getting outside as much as I can, going up on the parking garage as much as I can, taking lots of pictures, and sharing those. And that's probably what you see a lot of on social media.
So was that a deliberate thing, or did you just kind of get tired of being down in the cubicle farm and just wanted to go out and started taking pictures and putting them up on the gram? How'd that go?
No. So let's see. Trying to think the best way to sort of give you the backstory. I worked in accounting for many, many, many years in other industries. I worked for an education company for a long time. And then I found my way into a Fortune 500 fast food company for a while. And I had always had an interest in aviation. I didn't have a background. I'm not a pilot. There are no pilots or aviation people in my family. But I've always had an interest, and that interest had just sort of steadily been growing. And one day while I was working for this fast food company, I thought, you know what? I do not care about fast food. I have zero interest in this. I wonder what it would be like to work in an industry that I'm actually really interested in. So I thought about it and I thought, how cool would it be if I could find a job in aviation? And then I thought, well, but I'm not a pilot. I'm not a flight attendant. I'm not air traffic control. So, what could I possibly do in aviation? But then I found out that this fast food company I worked for had an aviation department. So I went digging around to find out a little bit more about it. And sure, they had pilots, they had mechanics, they had, I wouldn't call them flight attendants exactly, but people whose job it was to make sure that the flights had catering and everything else you need to make a private jet operate correctly. But they also had an accountant. And that sort of everything kind of clicked into place for me. And it dawned on me that you don't have to be a pilot. You don't have to be a flight attendant. You don't have to be a mechanic to work in aviation. Aviation is big. And there are lots of spots in aviation where people can fit in, even if they're not pilots or what have you. So I started looking around to see what aviation-related companies were in my area. Of course, the airport is a big one. And I just bided my time. I watched and waited. And when jobs came up that I thought would be appropriate, I would apply for them. And then finally, one day, an accounting position opened at the airport. And I applied for it. And they gave me a call to do an interview. And I was so excited. And then when I got the call that they were offering me the job, I was beside myself, really. So when I went into this position at the airport, I went in as an aviation enthusiast who was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make the most out of this.
That's amazing. And, if anybody's listened to this, like maybe even one episode of this podcast, they're going to know that you just hit the nail on the head right there, that there are so many places in aviation for people that, yes, pilot, controller, mechanic, flight attendant, those are the obvious ones and they're great, but there are just so many other ways that you can fit into aviation if you've got the sickness. And I'm curious, actually, how far back did that start for you? Like, when did you first know that aviation was something that was more than maybe just a hobby for you, but that you had the passion for it?
Wow. That's a good question. I would say it was probably maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I'd always been interested. I grew up just outside of Philadelphia, and my parents' house was under the flight path for planes coming and going to Philadelphia International Airport. I would also see planes going to Dover Air Force Base, and there are several small airports nearby. And so the airspace above my parents' house was really, really busy. And as a kid, I spent a whole lot of time looking up. As I got older, I would enjoy going to air shows. I found apps like Live ATC and Flight Radar and some other tracking apps, and I really enjoyed using those. But I would say there was a show, I don't know if you remember it, it was called Airplane Repo. Now, we can debate all day how accurate that show was in terms of the portrayal of the people who did Airplane Repo. But what I loved about it were the airplanes, Learjets and Cessnas and float planes. And I just started really connecting more and more and more with people who are involved in aviation via social media. And the more I got to know and the more I learned, the more I wanted in. So it really just sort of clicked for me when I was sitting there thinking, I'm not interested in hamburgers. What can I do? Like, I've really just gotten into aviation in the last couple of years and I would love to work there. And that's kind of how it came about.
Wow. Okay. So you really got in on the general aviation side of things then, right?
In a way, yeah, I guess you would say that. But I'm a non-discriminatory aviation enthusiast. I love it all. I love military planes. I love commercial planes. I love biz jets. If you watch me on social media, then I post lots of pictures of biz jets. But I love the Cessnas, and I love it all. I really do. It's a sickness.
Sure. No, it is. And welcome to the club. But no, the business jet thing is awesome. And that's what I spend my whole day looking at myself. And so I hear you. And when I look on your Instagram feed and things like that, I always see these great photos of, citations like Excels and, Citation 10s and Gulfstreams and things like that. When you go outside and you decide to start shooting photos, what are you using? Are those just on your phone, or are you using a pretty nice camera? Because those are really good pictures.
Thanks. No, I don't use my phone very often, and I'm going to get in trouble here because I don't remember the exact type of camera I have. It's a Canon, and it's a fairly simple one. I would say it's a step or two above your basic point and shoot, but it's not super complicated either. And I wish I could remember exactly what kind of camera it is, but I keep it, I take it with me everywhere I go. And when I go up top on the garage, I have it with me. And if I see something that looks interesting, I get it out and start snapping pics.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I assume those probably weren't coming from a phone, but I'm a Canon shooter too. I use a 77D for my photos and the vlog and everything else. And yeah, Canons are great cameras. Your pictures are amazing. Anybody who has not checked out Jen Niffer on Instagram, you got to go check it out. She takes amazing stuff. So let's move on a little bit. You said
Sure.
You don't hold any pilot certificates and there's nobody in your family that's a pilot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wow. Okay. So in addition to shooting great photography, you also do a lot of writing too. Tell me about your blog.
Yeah. So I've always enjoyed writing ever since I was a kid. And when I started working at the airport, I realized that I would have a lot of things that I could write about and share that people would be interested in reading about. So that's when I started the blog. And it's partially about what it's like being around an airport every day. But it's also about my other adventures in aviation, places I've gone and things that I've done.
I love the name of your blog. You want to tell everybody what it is?
Yeah, it's Tales from the Terminal.
That is such a cool name. I can't believe nobody else had that. That's great. Or did you have to buy it off someone?
No, nobody else had that. So yeah, and it's pretty perfect because I do spend most of my time in the airport terminal. I'm very lucky that that I work for an airport authority. The airport is run by this it's somewhat independent authority. We have a board of directors whose members are appointed, some by the city and some by the county. But because we're an airport authority, our offices are actually located at the airport. For many airports, especially those that are run by the city, the people who do the accounting for the airport are in the city and not at the airport itself. So we actually, the office that I'm in is on the ground level. We have giant windows that look right out at the south runway. So, I always have half an eye out there so I can watch what's going on. I know which runways are in use at any given time, pretty much. So it's awesome. I love it. I love being able to look out and see what's going on out there.
Wow. How do you get anything done?
Okay. So here's the deal. I hear this a lot. Jen, you could never have a desk with a window because you would never get anything done. And my answer is, if I had a desk with a window, I would be able to just look up and see what I want to see and then get right back to work. As it is right now, I have a desk that does not have a window. So if something's going on out there, I have to get up and go run down the hall. So I'm trying to lobby for a window seat on the premise that I'd actually get more done. So don't blow my cover. Don't blow my story.
I like your angle. I like it. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm just going to walk right out the front door. All right. So let's get into aviation nerd superstardom here with Oshkosh 2018. That just happened. And I was watching your feed the whole time. You and I'm looking at a picture right now, actually, of you standing here with Sean Tucker. I see another picture here with the tower. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it would be an understatement to say that you covered it well this year, but I don't even know where to start. Let's just say Oshkosh 2018 and go.
Oh, wow. Well, every year Oshkosh is pretty amazing. Have you ever been?
Yes, I have. I've been twice.
Okay. And hopefully you're going to come back sometime soon, right?
Yeah, I was going to go this year. I ended up having to do a family thing instead. I actually took that entire week off intending to go to Oshkosh, and I actually ended up in Cleveland instead, which was kind of funny. But I got a jump seat right out there, so it wasn't a total loss. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Oshkosh, for anybody who might be listening who isn't familiar with it, is it's more than just an air show. It's more than just a fly-in. It's more than just a convention. It's really for 1 week in July, this city or town in Wisconsin turns into aviation mecca. And if it gets up in the air, then you can find it at Oshkosh. There's hot air balloons, there's ultralights, there's model airplanes, there's drones, and there's every other kind of airplane that you can think of. And honestly, if you name it, they probably don't just have one there. They've probably got 10 or 20. It's huge. I think attendance this year, as far as people, was something like 600,000 people were there over the course of a week, and something like 10,000 or 11,000 airplanes. And until you go and see it for yourself, it's really, really hard to envision what 10,000 airplanes looks like. It's hard to wrap your mind around that. So whatever it is that you're into aviation wise, Oshkosh has it. And it's almost to the point in some ways where it's a little overwhelming. And I tell people who are going to go, like, just forget about seeing everything you want to see. It's not going to happen. Even if you are there from the beginning, when the show opens, till the day that the show ends, you're not going to see everything that you want to see. It's just too big. So just go see what you can see, enjoy what you get to see, and make the most of your time there, however much time you're able to spend.
Sure. So do you have any super high points you want to talk about? Like, obviously meeting Sean Tucker, I'm sure it was a pretty high point. Visiting the tower, I bet too. But what else happened while you're there?
Gosh, let me think about it a moment. Well, I finally got over to the seaplane base. And I think that's really special. I don't know of any other air show out there, or there probably aren't very many air shows out there, I should say, where you can go and check out seaplanes. My part of the world, I don't see seaplanes here pretty much ever. So being able to go over to the seaplane base was really pretty special. And it's sort of an oasis of quiet in the midst of all the hubbub that is Oshkosh. So getting to do that was pretty special. Let's see, just getting to meet up with all the aviation enthusiasts and friends that I only see once a year was pretty special. I got to go on board the A220, which I stubbornly insist on calling the C Series. They flew that in. It's new, so getting to go on board and check that out was a lot of fun. Gosh, I could probably go on forever. I got to go down to the ultralight field and get up close and personal with some of those aircraft. So, wow, yeah, busy time, lots of fun, tons of warbirds as always. Good stuff.
Sure. And I heard you got to visit the tower while you were there too. How was that?
Yes. So probably if I had to pick one highlight, it would be the visit to the tower. I don't know. At any airport, I really feel like part of the personality of an airport is that tower. And some airports, of course, have more than one. And at Oshkosh, there's this giant tower, and it has a banner on it that says busiest. I think it says world's busiest tower. because during the week of the show, that place is hopping. You have so many planes coming and going. And so I've always really wanted to get up there, and being able to go visit this year was really definitely a highlight. I hope you'll forgive me if I give a little shout out to Dispatcher Mike, who has a podcast called the Flying in Life podcast. He actually was the one who set up the visit, and he just let me tag along. So I got very, very lucky. So I just want to give him a little shout out, because he did an interview with the air traffic manager, and I highly recommend people give it a listen. But yeah, getting to go up there, and we got to go up during normal operations. So it wasn't during the air show when the tower kind of shuts down, but it was during normal operations when there are teams of people up there working with airplanes, getting people in and out. And it was really interesting to be a fly on the wall up there. I wish I could have stayed all day, but I think they gave us about 10 minutes to check it out.
Sure. So I know when you arrive at Oshkosh, I have not yet flown a personal aircraft in there, but obviously there are people standing, 50 miles out in fields or something like that, trying to direct people to certain, I think, entry points or something. And then the tower takes them from there. Is that correct? Is that what you saw? Or how did that all work out?
Yeah. So the process of flying into Oshkosh is, from the perspective of a non-pilot, it seems a little bit complicated, but you're correct. The approach controllers, the FISC controllers, are out in a field. I believe they're out near Ripon, which is about, I want to say 20 minutes or so outside of Oshkosh. They're in a field with binoculars, and they are controlling planes from the ground. And there's a huge NOTAM, I forget how many pages it is, but that explains to pilots the procedure. And there are very specific procedures that you have to follow in order to get in to Oshkosh. The vast majority of traffic is coming in VFR. They have a few IFR slots every day, but you have to sign up for those well in advance, and they are not easy to get. So I think it's safe to say that most of the planes that come in are coming in VFR, and they do have to follow these very specific procedures to get in. So yes, you have the controllers at FISC out in the field, but I haven't gone to visit them yet. I understand that you can go visit them. You need to make sure you take donuts. That's apparently a really important requirement. But I was up in the tower. So one of the things I noticed while I was up there is that they work in groups. So I don't know how this is for you when you're working, but they're working in groups of 4. So you have one rookie controller and then 3 others that are more experienced, all working together. I'm not entirely sure who they've got on the microphone, but they've got one person actually doing the talking, and then the other 3 are sort of watching and feeding information that this person who's on the microphone is then passing along to the various planes that they're controlling.
Wow. Okay.
We learned that for each runway, you've got 9 controllers working together to coordinate the traffic on that runway. So you've got 4 controllers and a supervisor, I believe, in the tower, and then 4 more controllers down in an area on the field. They call it a moo cow. Not sure how they got the name. I'm guessing Wisconsin, cows, cheese, but they call it a moo cow. And those are down on the field. They're little raised platforms. And so you've got 9 controllers working together to manage the traffic for each runway. Just out of curiosity, how many controllers do you have working each runway?
Well, it's anywhere between 2 and 4. But yeah, no moo cows, though.
No moo cows, and there's not 9 of them, right?
No, there are not. Yeah, 2 to 4 is pretty standard, yeah.
Yeah. So the amount of coordination that it takes, it's impressive, to be sure. And I don't know, it's quite a production, and it's very impressive. And I would say anybody who ever has an opportunity to tune in on live ATC and listen as the controllers work through all the traffic, it's fascinating to listen to. I was actually able to get out to Oshkosh early this year, so I was able to watch some of the arrivals on Sunday. And I don't know how much you followed along in terms of the weather, but when there's bad weather on the weekend preceding the show, it can really cause some pretty major issues because, as I said, most of the traffic coming in is VFR. So when it's raining or there are storms in the area, as there were this year, that means people can't come in, so that when there's a break in the weather, everybody tries to come in all at once, and it can be very chaotic. And I really have to give, a major shout out to all the controllers who are working to sort of keep everything under control, to stay calm and cool and collected. The air traffic manager who we spoke to, his name was Tim Fitzgerald, and he made a real point of saying that they are very cognizant of the fact that they are providing a service, that they are trying to be that calm voice that gets you through to your destination. They know that for a lot of pilots, this is the busiest airspace they are ever going to fly in. And they are really take pride in trying to make that as uncomplicated and as straightforward as it can be.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Big shout out to the tower controllers there, to my fellow guys and guys and girls. I mean, that place, I can only imagine. I mean, they're earning their annual salary in 1 week. I'll tell you what. Yeah,
they absolutely are. Now, have you ever thought about volunteering?
I have thought about it. Yeah, there are a lot of ways you can volunteer as a controller. There's something, I forget how you do it to actually get to the tower, but there's that, and then there's also the union NATCA. They need people to work the tent or booth or whatever it is,
yes,
that like the ASCA controller booth and things like that. And
yep.
That's pretty hard to get into because, as you can imagine, a lot of people want to do it. So
right.
that is something though that I do want to do at some point in my career.
Yeah, I always stop by the booth when I'm there. For one thing, they typically have donuts and coffee, but they also have just a lot of interesting information. They do little seminars right there at their booth where they talk about various aspects of the airspace, air traffic control, working with pilots, things pilots should be aware of, safety issues. So they're incredibly busy the entire time that they're there. I understand that most of the controllers that they bring in to work Oshkosh are from the central service area. So I gather that's kind of a swath of the country from Wisconsin sort of straight down to Louisiana and Texas.
It's divvied up kind of interesting. Yeah, we have all these different service area regions, and I'm guessing that, they probably keep it within their own.
They do, although we were told that they do bring some people in from the eastern service area, especially some controllers that work Sun and Fun. Sun and Fun is very similar to Oshkosh. It's held in Florida. I think it's in April every year. It's not as big as Oshkosh, but it is similar. So I can understand why they would want to bring those controllers in as well. And when you come in to be a controller, you do rotate through the different positions. So I believe they said you do 2 to 3 shifts in the tower. You'll do one each on each runway, the north runway, the south runway. You'll do a rotation at Fisk. And then they also will do a rotation at Fond du Lac. Now, Fond du Lac is nearby, and it's normally an uncontrolled field. But during the week of Oshkosh, they take it over, open up the tower and run the tower because so many people are coming in and out of there on their way to and from Oshkosh.
Sure. Yeah. The FAA sets up temporary towers actually a lot. There's a small airport up in Los Angeles that does a pretty neat air show. And that's one of the things that they do is they take volunteers and they set up just a little temporary tower. There isn't even a building there. So it's essentially just a little trailer that they pull in there. But they pull in this trailer, stack it up, and then everybody gets a day to kind of figure out how to do it. And then, when the air show's not going on, there's a tower there, even though normally it's an uncontrolled place.
Right. So apparently planning for Oshkosh begins about a week after Oshkosh ends. So they're already starting to work on getting plans in place for next year. I know they take the time to sort of sit down, look at how the year went, and then talk about things that they should change, improve, do differently for the next year. There's a lot of coordination that goes on It's not just the people who are going to be working there in Oshkosh, but they're also coordinating with, Madison Tracon, Chicago Center, and the surrounding areas. And they will all go together to sort of develop and put out the NOTAMs that are released each year. We also were told that the controllers that are going to be working Oshkosh get all the materials to start preparing a couple of months in advance. And then they spend a full 8 hours in-person training once they arrive on site before the show begins, just to go over everything and make sure everybody's clear on what's going on. And when you volunteer to work Oshkosh, you are a rookie. Even if you are really experienced wherever it is that you're working in the system, you could have been there for years and years and years. But when you come to Oshkosh for your first time, you're a rookie. And you're a rookie for a couple of years before you get to move up and be the next level. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning, and getting to go up and witness it and getting to meet with the air traffic manager. I really got a big appreciation for what all goes into making that happen. And it's interesting to hear you say that they don't just do this for Oshkosh, although Oshkosh is probably the biggest scale that they have to do, but that they do it for other events as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Oshkosh is definitely the Mac Daddy of all of them. No question there. But yeah, Sun and Fun, I think, is a pretty close second. I know for the AOPA air shows, those get, or fly-ins, I should say, those get pretty crazy. I've been to Palm Springs and actually been on an ATC panel and worked the ASCA controller booth at that one. But I also got to spend a fair amount of time in the tower and watching them do that. Yeah, approach sets them up with a couple. There's just, I think, 2 entry points, and then everybody's tagged up on radar so that the tower is just going to reach out to them. There's no contact. It's almost like a military style where you just sent over to monitor a frequency, and then they reach out and find you, and then it's just a constant flow inbound. And then there's a time when you can arrive, a time when you can depart, and a time when it's closed. Right. Because there's pretty much no other way to do it. You cannot run a normal operation. No, that's very true. And I think it's somewhat similar. I know there's not your normal radio back and forth that you would have, if you're controlling an airliner or even a regular general aviation airplane. You're issuing instructions. They're repeating those instructions back to you. But they can't really do it that way for Oshkosh because it's so busy and there's so many planes. So that's where the whole controller in the field identifies your plane, asks you to rock your wings so that they know that you are listening and that you are understanding what you're being told. And then they issue instructions and you just basically follow them right on in. Yeah, you can't slow it down and you can't make it stop. It just has to keep on going no matter what. Yeah. And as I said, there was some bad weather this year, and I cannot remember how many planes they managed to get in the good weather window that they had on Sunday. I want to say, it stopped raining and they started operations around noon on Sunday and ran until the airport closes at 8:00. And they got, thousands of airplanes in that time, but there were also a whole lot of airplanes they just couldn't get in. To make it work, everybody has to understand the rules and abide by them. And I know there were issues where planes were coming in and they were too bunched up. And the controllers at Fisk would just say, look, you can't come in like this. You are too bunched up. I need you all to turn left and go back and get back in line again and give yourselves, however much separation. I think they were asking for a mile separation at that point. So it was a real challenge. I think that is going to be one of the issues they'll be looking at this fall and winter as they begin planning for next year. What can they do to try to improve that? Yeah, I can only imagine. As somebody who tries to put people at almost exactly a mile, maybe a little more, depending on their speed, just with VFR airplanes, the same kind of airplanes we're talking about, Cessnas, Pipers, Bonanzas, things like that. It's really hard to get that spacing just right of like exactly a mile or just a little more, because it's kind of hard for pilots to judge what a mile looks like in the air. And then, everybody's got to go just a couple knots different speed. And there's just little variations that if you're trying to run it that close, sometimes you can't do it. It gets too tight. And then, you got to send someone around. But, luckily at a normal operation, you can just send them around and put them in the pattern and come back and you're talking to them. But for somebody standing in a field with binoculars, asking people to rock their wings, I can only imagine the frustration felt to try to, just start over and reorganize the whole thing.
Right. I think there was a little bit of frustration on both sides, although, ever the consummate professionals, as far as while I was listening, the controllers were calm, cool, and collected. They were just telling it like it is. Hey, you guys are too close and we can't run you through this way. You're going to have to go back around. And, I think they do an amazing job considering what it is they're up against, the large numbers of planes trying to come into the show. It really is impressive. And I encourage, even if you're not going to Oshkosh, just tune in, watch, listen. And it's something to behold for sure.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to leave a link to all that stuff in the show notes. It's something I can't believe that they do it each and every year. It's incredible. Big shout out to those guys and gals. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of fun to watch. I'm sure it's stressful for the pilots trying to follow the instructions and come in. They did, Tim Fitzgerald did mention that they have looked at trying to have two different approaches based on speed. So one for your slower airplanes and one for your faster. Because that is a real challenge, as you mentioned, everybody's got, a speed that they have to go, and some are really slow and some are faster, and how do you blend those together? So they talked about having two different approach corridors, one for faster planes and one for slower planes. But the problem has been, how do you then get them together when they finally get to the airport? And so far, they haven't found a way to work that out. So for now, they'll continue using the approaches that they're currently using. But as I said, they're already hard at work looking at next year. So we'll see. Perhaps they will find a way to make it work, or they'll find some other way to reorganize things a little bit just to try to smooth out some of those bumps.
Oh, let's see. They got almost a year. You think they can build a couple more runways between now and then?
Knowing what I know about how long it takes to put in a runway, the answer is no.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
I'll tell you what, I heard that back in the day, you've got some air traffic experience on the computer and on the ramp. Tell me about that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't. So way back when, I don't want to date myself too much, but we'll just say in the 80s, we had a computer class in school, and the class was really mostly just playing around with various simulators. We had a flight sim, we had a nuclear power plant sim, and we had an air traffic controller sim. So the air traffic controller sim, again, remember, this was the 80s, so all of this was pretty new, and it was pretty, I'll use the word archaic. It involved typing in instructions. So there was no conversation. You're not talking to pilots and telling them what to do, but you play the role of a controller at an airport, and you have planes that are just passing through your airspace. So you had to type in commands to tell them, what flight level you wanted them at and how fast you wanted them to go. And you had to be mindful of spacing. You had planes that were coming into land, you had planes that were taking off, and you had to type in instructions to manage all of that. So I thought, all right, this looks really complicated, but I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. I'm typing in commands frantically, directing this plane here and that plane there. And it went really well. I managed to get everybody through my airspace without any issues, managed to keep the right separations, managed to keep everybody at the right flight levels. I got everybody into land who wanted to land, and everything went really well. And I sat there, I sat back, I looked at my computer, and I was really proud of myself. I thought, yeah, I can do this air traffic control thing. That wasn't too bad. And then all of a sudden, one of the planes that was sitting on the ramp area burst into flames. And then another one burst into flames. And then another one. And the next thing I knew, I had airplanes on fire all over the airport. So, of course, I freaked out. And my teacher came over and said, what's going on? And I said, why are there airplanes on fire? And the teacher laughed and said, okay, first of all, that's not a fire symbol. It's a fuel symbol. And the reason you have all of these airplanes with the fuel symbol flashing is, did you have anybody take off?
Oh, no.
And then I realized that I never had anybody take off. And all these planes, they all ran out of fuel sitting around waiting for me to tell them to take off.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you forgot about half of them.
So, yeah, that was a little bit traumatic. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure air traffic control is for me.
So you decided to pursue a life of accounting instead.
Well, I definitely was like, yeah, no air traffic control. The flight sim didn't really go any better. I was able to take off, but I couldn't land. Every time I tried to land on the sim, I crashed.
Yeah,
so
that's always the hard part, isn't it?
It is. And eventually I decided, fine, I'm just not going to land. And I spent the entire class trying to make the fuel last so that I wouldn't have to try to land before class ended. And I was terrible at that also. And I found out it's even harder to land when you have no fuel. So those were my two big takeaways from high school computer class.
Yeah, it is tough. It makes it harder, but then you have to do it even more.
So, but more recently, I'm not a ramp controller, but I have kind of sort of played one on the de-ice pad. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to, initially I had the opportunity, they opened this opportunity up to all the employees at the airport actually, to assist the airfield teams with winter snow operations. So there is a dedicated group of people whose job it is to keep the airport up and running in the wintertime when we have snow and bad weather. But they will train a group of employees to be a backup for the airfield team. So they are also able to run the plows and to run the brooms and to be able to go out and assist the primary teams in keeping the airport open. So they'll do things like clear taxiways, clear ramp areas, and that kind of thing. So I was really interested in that because who doesn't want to drive a ginormous plow out on the airfield? I mean, that's, heck yeah, sign me up. But when I took a look at it and when my boss took a look at it, we were concerned that the time commitment was going to be too much for me to be able to do my regular job and also get all the training and everything that I was going to need to be able to help out with the airfield team. So I was pretty disappointed. But a couple of days later, my boss kind of pulled me into her office and said, hey, so operations found out that you were interested in helping with snow ops. And they have another opportunity for you. And why don't you go up and talk to the operations manager, find out more about it, and see if you'd be interested. So I met with the operations manager, and what they were looking for was someone to assist with de-ice pad management. So let me ask you this. How often do you guys have snow operations?
Never.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured you were going to say, but I thought I would check. So basically, the way it works at our airport, and every airport is different, but the way it works at ours is the ramp is uncontrolled. However, during the wintertime, if there's an active snow event going on, or in the mornings when there tends to be frost on the planes from sitting overnight, operations will take control of the ramp and they will run the de-ice pad. And that involves sitting in a vehicle. So you don't get to be up in a tower looking down at everything. You don't have a computer to help you. You sit in a vehicle on a de-ice pad and you talk to airplanes on radio and you give them taxi instructions and you position them onto the pad and then you hand them off to their crews for actual de-icing. And then when the de-icing is complete, they check back in with you and you turn them over to ground control so that they can exit the de-ice pad and head on their way. So I've had the fun experience of sitting in a truck, talking to planes on the radio, giving them instructions, directing them into the pad, while also keeping a log of every single airplane that you talk to. noting the time onto the pad, the time off the pad, making sure you note the flight number. And then all of those are recorded later for our records. So it can be pretty intense. I call it Tetris with airplanes. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to juggle all at once. So the winter that I did this was actually one of our milder winters. So I never got completely signed off. Much like when you're learning to fly or perhaps doing ATC, you have to have someone follow you around and make sure that you know what you're doing. And then they sign off to say, yep, you know what you're doing. You can go on your own. And I unfortunately never got completely certified to go on my own. But we'll see. I've heard talk that I might get the opportunity to try it again this year.
Well, it sounds like there's not only a little bit of control going on there, but a fair amount of accounting too. So it might be perfect for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we don't charge for the de-ice pad, but we do charge for a lot of other things. And for me, it's just interesting to sort of put all the pieces together. And I guess that's one of the things I love in general about where I work and what I do is I get to see, the airport side of aviation, and I get to be exposed to all different pieces of it. I never in a million years when I took the accounting job ever thought that I would be given an opportunity to be talking to airplanes on the radio. And yet I have been. So it's been awesome.
And it's kind of addicting, isn't it? You start talking to airplanes on the radio and it kind of like it. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. It can be a little stressful, on a normal just morning where we're just knocking the frost off. It's not too bad. It's busy. You have a lot of planes that are all trying to get out right around 6:30, 7 o'clock, which is why operations goes ahead and runs the de-ice pad during those hours. But it's not too bad when it's just knocking the frost off. But when it's snowing and you have an actual snow event, it gets even crazier because it takes much longer to de-ice the planes. And then you get people wanting to get in and you don't have space and you have to find a place to put them. That gets pretty intense. So I don't know that you'll ever find me working an actual snow event, but helping out, knocking the frost off, that I think I could probably do. So we'll see if I get the opportunity to get back at it this year.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, if we were up in the tower, it might be better, but they seem to like the idea of having us out there in a truck. The good part about being in a truck is if you need to help someone get into the pad by just, hey, I tell you what, just follow me. I'm in a truck. I've got my lights on and I'll position you in the pad. You can do that when you're in a truck and you can't when you're up in a tower. So I can see the advantage to that. But the disadvantage is when I'm sitting in a truck, I can't see everybody. So you have to keep it in your head. Who is pushing from where and where they're coming from? And is anybody else also coming from that direction? And where are you going to put them when they get over to the pad? It's Tetris with airplanes.
Absolutely. Well, if you do get to do it again, I hope you bring your camera with you.
Oh, heck yeah. I absolutely will.
Well, it probably seems silly at this point to ask, but where can people find you if they want to see all your great photography and read your blog?
Sure. So you can find my blog at talesfromtheterminal.com. And you can find me on Instagram also at talesfromtheterminal. And on Twitter, I'm at Jen Niffer. So that's Jen_Niffer.
I don't know, if I didn't already have an Instagram account, I'd probably be going and getting one right about now. Isn't Jennifer cool? Anyway, before we go, I want to share something funny that listener Dave Abbey brought to my attention. Every time I end the show, I say, good day. And it's a thing that a lot of controllers say when they pass an airplane along to the next controller, the next sector or whatever. And it always kind of has been. Matter of fact, I remember hearing controllers say that when I was a kid listening to air traffic over 30 years ago when I was thinking about what I wanted to do when I grew up. But anyway, on Twitter, Dave sent me a picture of a street sign that says Paul Harvey Drive. And at first I was like, Dave, what do I have to do with Paul Harvey, man? I mean, sure, I may have a little bit of a radio voice, but it probably stops there. Because my podcast, it's kind of a far cry from the Paul Harvey news broadcast, but what? Oh, You know what? He did. He ended his broadcast with the words, "Good day too." Different inflection, of course. But anyway, I wanted to say that I'm not trying to rip off Paul Harvey's sign-off bit. It got me thinking, though, what are the chances that the whole ATC saying it thing was always a Paul Harvey takeaway? Does anybody out there in the community know? Because I'd really love to hear from you if you do. You can send me a recorded message right from the website using the SpeakPipe widget. And of course, that even works on your iPhone or Android or whatever kind of phone you carry around. Or as always, you can send me an email or message me straight on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Make sure to follow along on Instagram using the hashtag #podcastingonaplane, and as well, like the Facebook page. Our Twitter @handle is @podcastonaplane, and that way you won't miss a thing. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to Jen Niffer too at Tales from the Terminal. Anyway, I want to give Jennifer a really big thank you for being here. That was such a fun interview to do. I can't wait till Oshkosh next year. And until then,
good day.
The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. My comments and those of my guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc. are not part of my official responsibility as a controller or an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are mine and those of my guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. There is no nexus between Podcasting on a Plane and the FAA. Also, while I am a CFI, I'm not your CFI. Nor am I your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice. It's not legal counsel, and it's definitely not flight instruction. If you are in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.